Back to the Dean Obeidallah show. Right now, I'm very happy to have back on the show Professor Jason Stanley, professor at Yale University, at least for now. He'll be in University of Toronto starting next semester, author of various New York Times bestsellers, including How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them, and a book we talked about on our show last year, I believe, Erasing History, How Fascists Rewrite the Past to Control the Future. Professor Stanley, nice to see you. Thanks very much for being on.
Great to see you, Dean. Thanks for the work you do.
Thanks. I'm not sure what I do, but in any event, I'll take the compliment. So, look, let's talk about what's going on now and how you view it in the bigger prism of, aspiring fascist, autocrat, and then what we might see in the future, which I really want people to start thinking about what was likely next. For example, today there was oral argument in the Harvard case on foreign students being banned. Trump wants to ban them. The judge is going to put on hold, at least temporarily. But is the attack on Harvard and other higher education institutes, universities, and colleges, is there a bigger picture here that people should be aware of what's going on?
Absolutely. This is why I wrote my book, Erasing History, which was published in September 2024. It's about the attack on universities. It's called How Fascists Rewrite the Past to Control the Future. The whole point of the book was to warn people that there was a massive attack on universities coming. Schools and universities. We had already seen it in many southern states. Florida, DeSantis led on it. But I knew, as someone who studied authoritarianism, that was an aspect of any authoritarian regime that people weren't prepared for. And you could see that people weren't prepared for it because the mainstream media was constantly attacking universities. The war on woke was a war spearheaded from the op-ed pages of the New York Times. So I could see that there wasn't this awareness of the centrality of schools and universities to democracy. There are three pillars of democracy: the press, the legal system, and schools and universities. It's pretty. We can add to that unions, we can
Mhm.
add to that NGOs, civil society organizations. Democracy is about participation. So civil society organizations, unions, that's how ordinary people participate. Schools and universities are spaces for deliberation, spaces for freedom, where people can test their ideas, where people can protest. Universities have been the site of protest. They're the standard site of protest. So we see in cases like Bangladesh, where the students overthrew Sheikh Hasina, we can look at Serbia today, where the students are protesting. Students are the source of are a central source of political activity and protest. So I knew that I could look at the media and could see how they were just simply paving the way for the Trump administration and not realizing that they were, thinking they were safe or something like that and
Right.
attacking another pillar of democracy. So, you can back the conceptual argument for the relationship between universities and democracy. Uh, we can bear down on. But let's start with the fact that there are no liberal arts colleges in authoritarian countries. No one's teaching women's studies in authoritarian countries. No one's teaching alternative perspectives. No one's challenging the gender binary in authoritarian countries. That's just for democracies. So when you think about that, when you think about attacks on gender studies, then realize that that only exists in a democracy. So free thought, challenging tradition. It doesn't mean not having a culture. You can have culture without tradition. And you can still have, and you will still have traditions in democracy, but you have the freedom to challenge traditions. When you attack democracy, you want to attack that freedom. So also, in a larger sense, for the particular kind of authoritarianism we face, which is a kind of authoritarian fascism,
Mhm.
personalist rule. Science is an epistemic authority. It's a kind of authority that is not Donald Trump. And what you want is the only authority to be the leader. Because Trump should be able, what they're doing is they're deleting all the data that tells you that Trump is wrong. So, and then they're demanding that our universities teach patriotic education. They say our universities are anti-American. Well, our universities are the source of our soft power. That what other thing does America do better than anyone else? So this regime is destroying the United States, and it's destroying the United States. Its attack on universities is, central to its destruction of the United States, because all over the world, people send their kids. And in China, my Chinese students are like, we can talk freely in America, like we can't talk in our
Mhm.
universities. But what we're doing is we're saying you can't come as a student to America unless you think America is the greatest country on earth. And if you ever criticize America, your visa will be revoked. Why would anyone from China come under those? Why would anyone from any country come to a country where they have to just spout nationalist rhetoric about a country they're visiting?
We watch Marco Rubio. Usually Secretary of States are trying to work on fostering relations with other nations, that kind of stuff. Marco Rubio is focused on ejecting students who are expressing any concern for Palestinians. And then today, front page of the papers, any Chinese student are going to go through everything. They have any ties to the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, they're gone. Although if you read the articles, they go, we don't even know how anyone would know if they have ties to the Chinese Communist Party. But what is going on here? Is this also from the playbook of authoritarianism?
Uh, well, this is they're just trying to get rich. Chinese students are, the backbone of the international fee-paying students. So I think, I mean, they're trying to destroy the universities and transform them into, just like places where you blindly praise the country and,
Right.
are told that America is the greatest nation on earth and, is for its freedoms that are being destroyed as we watch. Um, in other words, the universities will have to teach that fascism can't happen in America because it's the home of freedom at the very same time as fascism is destroying the United States. So the China, that's the source of our soft power with China. Beijing's elite sends their kids to Harvard and Yale. So what are we doing? Xi sent his daughter, I believe, to Harvard.
Wow.
So, and that's we have tons of Chinese students. It's stunning to take Chinese students out of the American system. It's a full break with China. It's like the one thing we have over them now. I mean, freedom is what we have over them,
Right.
and we're destroying freedom. And we have these institutions that they come to because they're places of free inquiry, and we're destroying these institutions. I think there's just multiple reasons for targeting Chinese students. They're the largest group of international students. Uh, they pay full fees. They contribute to the U.S. economy, and they're part of America's. This regime is destroying democracy. Their idea is to destroy the brand of democracy, the kind of the love of. You're supposed to have a love of nation, like and leader, like in North Korea or Nazi Germany. Trump said in his speech at West Point, we're going to, the U.S. Army represents the American flag, the greatest, so that's what things are supposed to be replaced by. And Trump also said we should put a cap on international students at Harvard, so Harvard will no longer be the great world university.
And I'm talking to Professor Jason Stanley. When you mentioned freedom, it made me think of George W. Bush saying Bin Laden hates us for our freedoms. And now we have a Republican president, and this regime wants to take away our freedoms. So
Yeah.
on some level, Bin Laden's winning, I guess, if you want to look at it simplistically by what George Bush's metric was, protecting freedoms, which is always a bullshit argument. But in any event, it sounded good. Now we
No,
have
no, it's that's our soft power.
right.
And our soft power is the crown jewel of our soft power is free inquiry at universities. The fact that you can criticize America and American universities is our power.
Yeah. Stephen Levitsky, I had on Stephen Levitsky a week ago or 2 weeks ago from Harvard, who co-wrote How Democracies Die, and said
I know,
that
Steve.
going after the universities, they're centers for dissent. He goes, they're inherently centers for dissent. And that's what they want to stop. So
Yeah.
Kristi Noem, to make it very clear that there's no subtlety in what's going on, after banning Harvard from accepting foreign students, she said, this should be a warning to every other university to get your act together, because we're coming to make sure you're facilitating an environment where students can learn, which I don't think they care about where students can learn. It's about, they're sending a message. It's not like hidden. Like, this is in your face about, like, if you don't do this, we're going to break Harvard as an example to others to get them in line. That's what it looks like to me. Is that what it looks like to you? Or is there something else?
No, looks like is weird because that's what it obviously
That's
is.
what it is. All right. So I'm
Right.
like,
Yeah.
so this is
I mean, they started with Columbia and
right.
Columbia fell into line immediately. They were going to destroy Columbia. They did they have destroyed Columbia because Columbia capitulated and is now just a university in Russia. And so Columbia is just a clown show, and they wanted to make Harvard a clown show, but Harvard is resisting. So now they're like, okay, they're going to Columbia's a clown show. We're now going to make, but Harvard is resisting. So now we're going to show what happens if you don't become a university in Russia.
It's so the other part of this, we have the Trump weaponization that's even much broader than universities, obviously. And we've been on cable news talking about it, and you've talked about it a great deal. From media outlets, people like Chris Krebs, who used to work in administration, to universities, to law firms, and the list goes on.
Miles Taylor.
Miles Taylor. What I find interesting here is Richard Nixon and John Dean, they had the enemies list, but it was secret. We didn't
Yeah.
learn about it later. These guys, they understand the power of doing it in your face, because again, they want to send a bigger message. What do you think the end game is of the Trump regime?
Well, first of all, the power is to doing in the open is making you feel helpless
Right.
because nothing you can do. It's very clear the United States is transforming into a dictatorship. We can talk about the flavor of the dictatorship, but they're trying to say in fact, Tom Homan said the other day, he said, you know, we're indicting a congresswoman for assault, and congresswoman in New Jersey who perfectly
Yeah.
legally went
Yeah.
into the Newark ICE facility. And
Mhm.
Tom Homan said, we're indicting her for assault. And AOC said there will be consequences. No consequences, he said. So that's flaunting.
That's
That's
what he said, or
Yeah,
what
that's what he said. That's what he said.
Hakeem
Where are
Jeffrey
the
said.
consequences?
Right. Hakeem Jeffrey said, if you arrest a congressperson, it's a red line. And this
Yeah.
is before the arrest. And he said it over and over. And they go, what do you mean? He goes, it's a red line. Here we are a week and a half after the red line.
Yeah.
Nothing. I'm just thinking
That's
about
what
that.
Tom
I'm glad you
Homan
brought
said.
that point up.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Nothing. So yeah, I mean, the likelihood, I would say, is it's going to be Russia, China. We're more going to be like Russia than China. China has a kind of organizational appeal to its authoritarian character. I think this will be more like a kleptocratic, disintegrating, authoritarian country where the kleptocracy and corruption at the top will, like in Russia, filter down to everything. So there will be local little Trumps. And, as people see the legal system, if the legal system breaks down more, goes in the direction it's going in, people will see, well, there are no rules. And if you support Trump, you'll get pardoned for anything. And so that's why I don't think we're going in the direction of China, which has a high degree of central organization. I think it'll be more like an autocracy like Russia. What I'm hoping as a better case scenario is that we'll end up like Hungary, a kind of disintegrated nothing burger with a sort of autocrat that's staying forever, enriching himself and his family. Except we have nuclear weapons, and so that's a problem.
We also have another thing, the Constitution. So every country you talked about, their leaders are there for long term. If
Yeah.
Donald Trump, the more successful he is at transforming America into autocracy, even just in a liberal democracy like Hungary, does that make it less and less likely he will leave? office? Because he's done all this work to transform it and taken more and more control. Well, at the end game, is it? Do you think it's to stay in power beyond 2028?
Donald Trump will never leave office.
Alive.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why I said the
The
aiming
only
on being
question, the only interesting question is what happens after he dies in office. Be that in 2030 or 2040, whenever that is, then there will be that's always the question with a dictatorship is what happens after the leader dies in office. Um, so yeah, Trump won't ever leave office, and he'll just be president forever
period.
until period.
Like he's not leaving unless physically he's unable to stay in office, right? I
Exactly.
agree 100%. And I've said this and people are shocked when I say it. He's not leaving office alive. He didn't leave peacefully in 2020. He is not leaving peacefully in 2028.
It's not even anyone who denies that is just incredibly naive, and I won't even really have a discussion with
I have
that.
listeners who raised the question, which is a fair question. Will we have a midterm elections in 2026? And from federal law, we are supposed to. But Donald Trump,
I think we will have a midterm election, but it won't matter. Like it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters in the United States is Donald Trump. Nothing else matters.
how shocking is that for you to say that and it not being hyperbolic? Like this is honestly where we are.
Yeah. Uh, I don't know. It happens in a lot of places. We had
Can't be that
monarchy.
it can't
We
be
had
that you're leaving the country. I mean, it's not that like no big deal. It's Thursday. We have an
Well,
autopsy
I'll be
Friday.
back in the country a lot, and it's
Maybe
not like no, I have an apartment here. The
they
the
let you back in.
right. Well, yeah, there are those issues, um, but I mean, I go to authoritarian countries, so I go to Hungary. Uh, I expect there will be elections. Expect it'll be this concept that my new Toronto colleague Lucan Way introduced of competitive authoritarianism, where you have these sort of show elections, but it's already clear. But I don't think anyone has any power other than Donald Trump in the United States today. So it doesn't, why would they stop elections? Because, you're already seeing senators run for governor because being a senator is kind of, not really powerful anymore.
Comedy stupid film. The
Yeah.
Luke Henway, he
He's
did that.
not the,
He did that with Levitsky, right? Did they work together? Because Stephen Levitsky talked about him and competitive authoritarianism, where you can still win local elections in Hungary. You really can. You're just never
yeah,
going to win a federal election, and they're going to control
exactly.
everything: judiciary, the media.
Right.
What about in Hungary? They control the media now over time. They've been able. It took 15 years. In America, do we still have media independence on the corporate level? Or I mean, we're just reading today that CBS is about to pay 15 million to Trump on a bullshit lawsuit. And I said, as a lawyer, it's a
Oh,
bullshit lawsuit.
only 15 million?
Well, Trump, the reporting is CBS is offering 15 because that's what Disney offered
Uh,
in tribute. And Trump wants more money because he wants to get more blood from CBS because they're
yeah.
trying to get a merger approval with Skydance and Paramount, right? So there's more leverage. But the point is corporate media, you mentioned them playing a role in getting Trump elected. Are they still playing a role in helping Trump in
Yeah,
power?
of course, CBS has, obviously 60 Minutes. They've had multiple resignations of important people over this. So CBS is toast. Looks like they're going in the direction of Columbia uh, and Columbia University. I think what I worry about is that, so what happened in Hungary is Orban forced used the courts to force all the media to sell themselves to his buddies. So, and I always thought that couldn't happen in the United States because you'd need someone, you'd need a compliant court and you'd need a lot of money. But actually, you don't even need a lot of money. Somebody could buy the whole media. Maybe the New York Times wouldn't sell, but you could buy all the television stations. You wouldn't even need that much money. I don't know how much it would cost, 10 billion, whatever. So, a minor oligarch now could do it. An A minus oligarch. You don't need Elon Musk.
Can
So
you list A B-list oligarch. And look, MSNBC is going to be for sale pretty soon, once it spins off later this year. And that might be the first thing someone on the right picks up to get rid of MS
Yeah.
and go from there. And you mentioned earlier something that is very interesting, hopelessness. The idea that the autocrat dictator wants you to feel hopeless. And why is that important for them? And then the flip side is, why is it important to see people protesting that we do see at Tesla's and people doing effective consumer boycotts in the big picture? So why is hopelessness important? And why is piercing that sense of hopelessness and inevitability important as well?
Yeah. So helplessness isn't because dictatorship is all about the only agent is the dictator. Everyone else, that's what, he's the only person with power, and agency is power. Democracy is supposed, we all have power. We all have equal power. So dictatorship is, only one person has power. So, that's why changing the education system is important, because you have to represent history as having no social movements. The only change in history is done by individual great men, like the leader. And so you ordinary people have no power. There was George Washington, he did stuff. There was Abraham Lincoln, he did stuff. There was Martin Luther King, he did stuff. Now there's Donald Trump, and he's doing stuff. Then there's Reagan, and then there's so only individual men. So you obliterate the history of social movements. Black Lives Matter never happened.
Right.
And especially labor history, because that's really dangerous. So that's why if you want to preserve democracy, you're only in a democracy if citizens have power, ordinary citizens. So by going out on the street, you're demonstrating that ordinary citizens do have power. But, I think in the United States, if there are mass demonstrations, there will be a lot of, I think Pete Hegseth, I suspect he'd send the military against the protests, and we'd start to see mounting deaths, but we saw that in Bangladesh, and a couple thousand, we don't know how many students were gunned down and killed, but at least 600, probably many more. So,
Mhm.
that's the situation we're in the United States, where the government has made it completely clear they will use the military against protests.
I recently interviewed an author, Marcel Dersis. He wrote a book, How Tyrants Fall. He's in Germany. I know you've gone to Germany. You speak German. You showed
Yeah,
us
it's
the video
fair.
of that. And in his book, he made a big deal about the difference between targeted repression and broad repression. Targeted repressions, the dictators and autocrats get away with a lot easier. Well, that's what Trump's
Right.
doing now. Well, his point in his book was that once you get to this broad-based repression, it really shows a sign of weakness in the administration on one level, but it also can spark a big backlash. And I don't want to be too romantic about America, but I have to hope in the DNA of Americans, if our military was crushing peaceful protesters, that enough Americans would rise up.
That's exactly how you do it.
Right.
But then there's a lot of death. So that's what happened in Bangladesh, and the students won. So it looks like it's happening in Serbia now.
All right. Well, last two quick things. I'm chatting with Professor Jason Stanley. We've talked a lot about what we're experiencing right now, what we might see. Anything else in your studies and the work that you've done that you expect to see from Donald Trump? Like, we should not be shocked when he does X or Y.
Well, I mean, I think responding to protests with the military is
Okay.
but we haven't seen protests yet. And part of the reason that we haven't seen protests is people know that he will respond to them with the military, you know. So right. So that's I think in the 2020 in the run up to the 2020 election, remember when the Black Lives Matter protests just vanished? That's because I think there was a broad fear among organizers that Trump was going to invoke the Insurrection Act, uh, and then possibly delay the election and use military force against protesters. So the increasing use of military force, and we're going to start seeing opposition politicians getting arrested.
And we've seen one Democratic member. We saw a mayor of Newark and they dropped the charges. Very last thing. Is it fair to say now this really is an international movement? I don't know if MAGA is a leader or just a part of it. What I'm getting at is you had J.D. Vance talk, and Elon Musk, of course, endorsing AFD in Germany. You had Kristi Noem fly to Poland this week to speak at CPAC there to endorse the far right candidate. Do they view the MAGA leaders view themselves as a bigger part of a movement?
Well, Marco Rubio said that no officials of any country that puts restrictions on content on social media will be allowed into the United States. In other words, no German member of the German government. So, and that's all, because, we're democracy. We believe in freedom of speech. That's why we're smashing universities. Except when it comes to gender or Black history so of course they view it as a global movement. Of course they're helping the far right parties everywhere, and of course Putin is, and it is a global movement. When I after Trump won, I spoke to a reporter from the Polish press, and he told me that the legislators from PiS, the far right in Poland, stood up, and the authoritarian far right stood up and applauded when it was announced that Trump had won. And I said, but why are they applauding? Trump is a friend of Putin. If you're Polish, patriotic defender of Poland at all, you hate Putin. And he said, yeah, all they care about is owning the libs.
Wow, at their own expense.
Yeah.
Like they'll usher in.
Well,
Well,
we see that here too. Right.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
well, Professor Stanley, thank you for making time in a busy day. It was great chatting with you. I look forward to chatting with you either again on the show or on cable news, where we end up on panels together.
Yeah, we always talk. It's always great to be in conversation with you, Dean.
Thank you, my friend.